What's up, guys, and welcome back to MoAn Inc. If you guys are new here, then hello. My name is Erica, and it is a pleasure to have you joining me today on the channel. Because for today's video, as you can see from the title, we are going to be chatting about breaking down and summarizing Aristophanes' FROGS. Before we can get into that, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. And now that you've so kindly done that, let's get into the video. The scene setting for this play, I should probably just warn you, does change. So unlike a lot of the other plays that we have already discussed, this play starts off outside the house of Heracles, which is where we'll begin, and then it moves to the underworld, specifically to the palace of Hades, down there. Okay, so we do have this drastic journey that happens in the play, but for all intents and purposes, at the beginning, when the stage opens, we can see the house of Heracles in the upper world, our world specifically. The first character to enter the scene is the god Dionysus. Now, he presents a very funny image because his clothing underneath sort of his disguise is very effeminate, right? So he's wearing this like bright yellow robe. However, on top of that, oh, and heels, by the way, but on top of that, he's wearing a lion skin and then holding a club. So it's almost like he's dressed very effeminately and then attempting to disguise himself as Heracles. So automatically when he walks on, the audience would have been like, what is happening here? He's on foot, and behind him comes on his slave called Xanthias. Now, Xanthias is technically on a donkey, and he sort of rides in, and he's got loads of luggage, okay? Not only on the donkey, but also on his shoulders, like the whole lot. He's carrying all of Dionysus's bags. Xanthias technically opens the play by asking Dionysus if he can begin with a joke. And there's this back and forth between the two where Dionysus is basically telling him what jokes are allowed and what jokes aren't. The jokes, by the way, that aren't allowed are poop jokes. He makes that very explicit. He's like, none of those. Those aren't funny. Those are very lowbrow. We are like upper people, okay? So they deliberate on the jokes whilst telling multiple jokes in this conversation. And Dionysus really opens the play after that by saying how unfair it is that he has had to walk all this way while Xanthias is on a donkey. He's like, all jokes aside, my man, this is not fair. How come you get to be on the beast and I, as a god, have to walk everywhere? Surely something is wrong. Xanthias having none of this. He highlights to Dionysus that of course he's on the donkey because he has to carry all of the luggage, and he couldn't do that just with his two hands. And Dionysus is like, well, technically you're not carrying the bags. Technically the donkey is carrying the bags. And Xanthias is like, hey, tell that to my shoulders, senor. And as they bicker, they approach the house. They come outside of the house. And Dionysus tells him that because they're at their first port of call, this is where they have, this is where the journey that they have taken has led them, where he has intended to go. And so Xanthias should get off the donkey anyways. And so he does. He hops off the donkey and he starts unloading the luggage whilst Dionysus goes to the front door. When he gets to the door, he knocks. But there's no reply. And so Dionysus, being a god, being very, very impatient, picks up the club that he's holding and whacks the door to the point where the person behind the door then starts going, what do you want? I'm coming. And after a few beats, the door swings open, and who is there but Heracles? And Heracles stops and takes Dionysus, his outfit, the situation in, and literally the first thing that he does is he just starts laughing hysterically and collapses to the ground. Dionysus, though, is really proud of himself because he thinks that he scared Heracles for a minute there. And so he turns around and he tells Xanthias, like, before he saw me, he was a little bit intimidated. You heard it in his voice, didn't you? And Xanthias is like, okay, but that's only because he probably thought you were a crazy person. You were banging with a club, so you did come across as a lunatic. Let's not be too proud of yourself. Heracles, though, still pissing himself laughing. He kind of gets himself together, stands up, sort of wipes his eyes of the tears because he's been laughing so hard, and attempts to turn to go back into the house. But Dionysus stops him and it's like, hey, we didn't come all this way just to make you laugh. I came all this way because I have to tell you something. So Heracles is like, okay, but he does tell us why he's been laughing, and he points to all the different parts of Dionysus' outfit, specifically the fact that he's wearing a dress and heels, but then is also wearing Heracles' famous lion skin end club. Like, Heracles just thinks this is one of the funniest things. And so he starts pointing everything out, being like, this is why I'm laughing. Like, I'm sorry, but you kind of asked for it, showing up to my house dressed like this. Dionysus, though, pretty much ignores him. And he goes on to tell us what he has gone there to tell Heracles. What he has gone there to tell Heracles, even. So he launches into this story about how he was on Cleisthenes' vessel, so his ship. And he and Cleisthenes, they actually destroyed like 12 or 13 ships, he can't quite remember. But whilst they're on their ship and they're going on this like crazy journey and doing all these crazy things, that one day Dionysus sat down to read Andromeda. And as he's reading Andromeda, he tells Heracles he got this like crazy urge within him. Now Heracles replies and he's like, an urge for what? A woman? Dionysus is all, no, not a woman. Wait, what? And Heracles says, okay, so a boy. And Dionysus is like, no, not a boy, hold on. To which Heracles replies, and he's like, oh God, you're right, I'm so sorry. A man, then. And when Dionysus goes to say no again, Heracles is like, hey, you're the one that told me that Cleisthenes was your friend? What else am I supposed to think about that? So Dionysus basically puts his hands up, and he's like, I need you to stop teasing me. I'm trying to tell you something. But you're wrong about all of them. I didn't have an urge for any of them. I had an urge to speak to Euripides. Heracles, mightily confused. Now all the jokes are aside, and he's like, Euripides, the dead guy, right? Dionysus says that the death part of Euripides doesn't really matter, but it's because Dionysus is looking for a poet who can write. And we will find out why this is later, but he's specifically looking for somebody who's a very good writer, who's good at prose. He needs someone to help him, and Euripides seems to fit the bill. So even though he's dead, Dionysus is very happy to venture down to the underworld to go and see him. Heracles interrupts, and he's like, surely there is a living poet who could do this job for you. And Dionysus is like, no. Dionysus tells us that the reason why he has kind of half dressed up as Heracles is because he wants to basically emulate parts of Heracles' character, shall we say. And he tells Heracles that it's because he has gone down to the underworld. He's already done his venture. If you didn't know, Heracles had to go down and get Cerberus or Kerberos, depending on if you pronounce it as a hard C or a soft C, the dog that guards the underworld. One of his 12 labors way back when was to go down to the underworld, pick this dog up, and bring it back to the king, which he did. So Dionysus is there because he says, hey, you've already gone to the underworld. I need help. How did you get down there? And also, I need all of the directions for when I get down there. Like, where are the good bars? Where are the bakeries? Where are the good clubs? Like, where do people hang out down there? You would know this stuff. Oh, and he also wants to know where the most bugs are in the underworld because he doesn't like bugs. Dionysus is like, I want to avoid the creepy crawlies as much as possible, so can you please let me know where they are so that I won't go there during my trip. Honestly, same Dionysus. Naturally, Heracles thinks that Dionysus has completely lost the plot. Okay, he is shocked that Dionysus wants to go down to the underworld to begin with, but also for his reasoning to go down to get Euripides. Heracles wants nothing to do with this. But Dionysus asks Heracles, what's the quickest way down? What's the way that he went, and what is the fastest route if he knows of more than one? And Heracles hilariously starts by telling him different ways that he can die. So he's like, oh, go up to the top of this cliff. And Dionysus is like, oh, and then what? And he's like, jump off. All of these things where Dionysus is like, I think you've misunderstood what I'm asking. I'm not asking how to die. I'm asking how to go to the underworld. What? So Heracles says that the way that he went is a really long way to go. It's not the quickest, most efficient way, but it's the way that he knows. And so Dionysus asks for the directions anyways. He says that he doesn't care how long it is. He just wants to get down there successfully. Oh my God, I nearly forgot that word. Whoa. Anywho, Heracles gives us all of the notes. So I wrote them down because obviously I would not remember the instructions to the underworld in this very specific niche play. So the directions that Heracles gives us are: Dionysus first needs to go to the bottomless lake. And when he's down there, there will be a ferryman who shows up with a small boat. And Dionysus is going to need 2 obols in order to pay him to board the tiny boat and to go across this lake. Now, the first stop is going to be where there are like snakes and wild beasts, thousands of them. It's not going to be nice, but that is where he's going to pass by first. And then the second stop will be the Great Mire of Filth, an eternal stream of dung. Again, all of these stops, I do want to make a note for you guys who are listening to this for revision or just to get a summary of the play. These would have all been funny. Each one would have been a line. Everybody would have been laughing at every single one of these. So that's the second stop. Ha ha ha. Cue the audience laughter. It's only after that that Dionysus will pass into what Heracles describes as looking like daylight that is in the mortal realm, but it's still in the underworld. And when he's down there, the daylight hits him, he will hear a flute player. Then he will come across men and women dancing who have been accepted into the mysteries, which, if you don't know what that is just the Eleusinian mysteries, even though the text will just say mysteries. Obviously, I don't go into all of the context for these plays because we'll be here all day, but that's a pretty important one that if you're reading it and you're like, what are the mysteries? They're just the Eleusinian mysteries. It's not that deep. If you want any more notes, though, if you buy the physical copy of the play, so I have this one, they do have all of the notes in the back, so all of the names that you might not get are jokes, all of the context things that you might not get, they are all explained in the back in case you need those. Not the point. Let's get back because we are just about to finish the instructions. So he's going to walk past all of the dancers that have been accepted into the mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, and that's how he will know that he is on the right path to Hades' palace, basically, in the underworld. So Heracles then wishes Dionysus luck, and then he goes back into the house. And exits the stage. So he does not come back on. Now, during this whole back and forth, we have seen Xanthias on the side of the stage unpack every single piece of baggage, right? That's been on this donkey, that's been on his shoulders. And literally as he puts down the last one, when Heracles goes back into the house and exits the stage, Dionysus turns around and he's like, all right, Xanthias, pick those bags back up and let's go. Xanthias is like, but I only just put them all down. But with a huff, he turns around, and where the donkey once was, like literally 5 seconds ago, the donkey has now disappeared. So Xanthias is literally just left looking around the stage at all of these bags and is like, what? In fact, he's so outraged by this that he turns to Dionysus and he's like, you're a god, why don't you just hire a corpse to do this instead of a slave? Like, hire somebody who doesn't have any muscle mass that won't feel this. Wouldn't that be easier than having me do it? And actually, Dionysus agrees with this. So of course, because it's a play, right on cue, a corpse gets walked in by these like bearers that are holding it. So the corpse is lying down and just gets marched on stage. Again, very comical. Dionysus calls out to the corpse, so as it's being walked by the bearers stop, because Dionysus is like, do you want to like carry my bags? The corpse sits upright and looks over to where Dionysus is and is like, how many bags you got there? Dionysus says, just these, just the ones on the ground. To which the corpse has a good look at it and then is like, sure, that'll be 2 drachma. What a hustler! Like, even in death, this corpse is like, I'll do the job if you hand over the money. Now that, for context, is an absurd amount of money for doing such a small job. And Dionysus says that. He's like, what do you mean? You're just going to be, 1, you're dead, and 2, you're just going to be carrying my bags, and you want 2 drachma for it? Absolutely not. And after he has his little fit, he goes into like his little pocket and he takes out his hand, and he actually doesn't even have 2 drachma. So that's really funny because he starts counting all of his coins and he's like, I've got 9 obols. And the corpse is like, wait, what? He basically tells Dionysus to fuck off. He doesn't say all of this, but this is the energy that he gives, because the corpse, as it looks over at Dionysus, just goes, no, lays back down in the bearer's arms and then gets walked off stage. That's it. This then leaves Xanthias looking at the bags, sighing, huffing and puffing, and is like, well, okay then, guess I gotta get this show on the road. Dionysus actually helps Xanthias put all the bags on Xanthias. Like, Dionysus doesn't help carrying them, but he does once Xanthias sort of gets everything, you know, in place. Dionysus is kind of like popping more bags on him so that he can carry everything, and then they continue on their merry way. And as they're walking, we have this scene change, right? Which is why I said at the start of the play, we go from being outside of Heracles' house down to the underworld. Because as they're walking on stage, the stage starts getting darker and darker, right? It's a bit more eerie. It's a bit more foggy. It's getting a little bit more underworldy as they continue to move. And Dionysus, in amongst all of this, he turns to Xanthias and he goes, "Where is this tiny boat? I can barely see anything, it's so dark." And through the fog, we can see a boat approaching them and a man standing on the edge of the little ferry boat. So as he's getting closer, Dionysus is like, "Oh, thank God, there he is." And he tries to get Charon's attention. Like, he's just like, "Hello, senor, I need to get your boat." Charon, like, ignores him, right? Does not reply, does not look his way, nothing. But eventually he does pull the boat up to where the men end up stopping, which is presumably on the edge of this lake, right? Which is what we were told they had to do. So they're standing in one place, the boat pulls up, and Charon, like, literally stops the boat and is like, "Hello, anyone for Lethe? Oblivion? The dogs? Anyone? That's where I'm going." And Dionysus is like, "Me, yes, me. I have to get on the boat. I need to go there." So Charon tells Dionysus to get on the boat. And as Dionysus is stepping in, he tells Xanthias to follow him into the boat. And that's where Charon is like, "No, I don't take slaves." The two men kind of look at him a bit like, "Well, now what?" And Charon clarifies that he only takes slaves who have fought specifically in sea battles. Like, that's the exception that he makes with slaves. He doesn't like any of the others and he will not take them. And Xanthias hilariously replies and he's like, "Oh, but I'm exempt from sea battles on medical grounds." Got bad eyes. But Charon is like not taking any of this. He doesn't care about the medical grounds with which Xanthias has been exempt on. And so he tells Xanthias that he has to walk around the lake and he's going to... He's going to take Dionysus on the boat and Xanthias will just have to meet them on the other side. And so Xanthias is like, "Oh, okay then." And he goes off into the dark. Now, when Dionysus gets into the boat, Charon starts telling him that he's got to sit in a specific spot because he's got to row. And Dionysus is kind of like, "I was not made for rowing. I am not made for this life." And Charon does not care. He keeps being like, no, this is how you have to do it. Like, you got to beat in this way. You've got to sit here. No, you're being too clumsy. Like, there is this whole back and forth where Dionysus is like, "I was not made for sea life. Please don't make me do this." And Charon is like, do you want to get across the way? If you do, then sail, bitch. Now, Charon does explain that actually as the boat moves and as it gets deeper into the lake, the rhythm to which he is rowing, to which Dionysus is rowing, will get easier because they will come across singing and that'll offer the beat with which he can follow. And obviously Dionysus is like, "What are you talking about? Like, what's singing?" And Charon is like, "The frog swans. What do you mean, what's singing?" Obviously, none of us have heard of the frog swans either. So us and Dionysus are like, the what? Charon does not explain this. And instead, he just starts saying, "Okay, I'm going to start with the rhythm and then the singers will take over." So he starts going in, out, in, out. And Dionysus is like beating to this rhythm. And then when the singing takes over, it is a completely different rhythm. Like, literally, you start hearing the chorus sing. And as the beat comes in for that, Dionysus is like, what the hell is going on? So the chorus in this play, the chorus does shift as we shift into the underworld, but the first chorus that we meet are the frogs, which is why this play is called Frogs. I've mentioned in all of my Aristophanes videos that he names his plays after the chorus. And the beat that kicks in actually before we even see the chorus, the one that is helping Dionysus row the boat, is the famous ancient ribbit. I'm calling it an ancient ribbit. That is definitely, like, don't write that in your exams. Please don't. However, that's essentially what it is because they do their really famous frog noise, which I'm gonna have to do it. And I need you to like not make fun of me because this is literally written in the ancient Greek. But according to Aristophanes, the sound of an ancient Greek frog is brekekekeks coax coax. Now that actually offers a really good beat if you say it, because it's written 2 times, then it'll be written in pairs again later throughout the scene, but it goes brekekekeks coax coax, brekekekeks coax coax. So it actually sounds really good, but that is the sound, in case you were wondering, of an ancient frog. You're welcome. Well, an ancient frog according to Aristophanes. Anyways, they do their little famous musical frog moment. So they are frogs that sing, and they dance. Very talented frogs. And as they're singing, Dionysus starts to like really complain about the rowing, right? And in particular, he is complaining because he's got blisters on his bum, his muscles hurt, his arms hurt. He is a little princess in his yellow dress. Like, he is just having none of this. And the whole time the chorus is singing, and Dionysus is like, but I'm in pain and I'm so tired. How big is this lake? When can I stop? And as he's complaining, obviously the chorus keep singing in the middle. And as I said, they keep repeating their little ancient ribbit, right? Over and over again. And at one point, Dionysus just turns to them and is like, hey, your little coax is a bore. Can you cut it out? And the frogs respond by calling him offensive for being rude about their ancient ribbit. And as Dionysus continues to complain about his muscles hurting, his blisters, the chorus continue to say coax every so often, which leads Dionysus to literally yell at them to shut up. And actually, in order to get under their skin so that they stop saying this, he starts ancient ribbiting at them, and then the chorus gets so annoyed that they start getting louder with their ancient ribbits. So we've got this like ribbit off that happens whilst Dionysus is in the boat. He's very stressed. He does not like doing this job. And the chorus are yelling ribbits at him, and so he's yelling ribbits at them. It's so chaotic when you read this scene. And as they're yelling at each other, Dionysus is like, you will never beat my volume, I am Dionysus! And because he's clearly lost the plot, the frogs just remain silent. They're like, okay, he's crazy. We're not engaging with this anymore. Which just leads Dionysus to do a, ha, I knew I'd win. But anyways, Dionysus stands up, leaves the frogs, obviously, and he pays Charon the 2 obols and then hops out on the side of the lake. And he starts calling out into the darkness. He's like, Xanthias! Hello, Xanthias, where did you go? And from the darkness, Xanthias lets out a coo-ee and then emerges from the shadows. Dionysus asks, since Xanthias has been walking this whole way, so he's more acquainted with the landscape, what this side of the lake is like. And Xanthias gives us like a lot of information. Okay, he gives us such an insightful response where he quite literally says, it's very dark and muddy. We can see that, Xanthias. Now, back when Heracles was telling us all of the instructions about how to get to the underworld, this is the part where he said that there were going to be lots of like murderers and bad people before Dionysus can actually get to the palace of Hades. So he says, like watch out for this part because there are like bad people here. And so Dionysus says to Xanthias, have you seen any bad people? Like, are there murderers? Are there ruffians? Are there hooligans? And Xanthias turns to him and is like, you can take a look all by yourself. And this man gestures to the audience. So both of the characters on stage turn to the audience and Dionysus is like, oh yes, I see them. It's so good. I love it when Aristophanes breaks this fourth wall, and this is peak. So both men decide that they have to keep moving forward. And as they kind of get themselves, ready to go and they take like 1 or 2 steps, they hear a noise. Xanthias, not thrilled about this. He turns to Dionysus and he's like, oh, what was that? We have a very brief moment here where we see a female monster, which is known as an impusa. This is not a very popular monster. Like, you don't see it a lot in mythology, but it is often and mostly associated with Hecate, so this makes sense. But this monster kind of appears, the men are like, and then it disappears. It's just sort of one of these things where like they have a chance to react. We know that there are monsters here. And remember, Dionysus does not like creepy crawlies. So if he doesn't like creepy crawlies, this man is not about actual monsters. Now, we never see the Impusa actually on stage. This is just something that they're kind of like interacting with. So when they tell us that it has moved sort of away from them, we start hearing, as Heracles told us, the flute playing. So as the noise comes nearer, this is now the morphing of the chorus, which turns into these like revelers, devoters. What is the word I'm looking for? It's like procession for the people who have been initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. And in order to make sure that these are actually the people that Heracles mentioned, Dionysus tells Xanthias that they're going to hide, just so that they can like observe these people before they ask for any directions or they get acquainted or any of that kind of stuff. So they move off into the corner of the stage, and this version of the chorus come on to do a little song and a jig, to lift up their prayers. You can read the text if you need all of these details, but it's not really that important for a summary. They have a whole religious procession right? So they literally do like a torchlight dance. They have a sacrificial meal. And what we know about these initiates is that half of them are men and half of them are women. So at some point in their song, they do start kind of singing different parts and singing back to one another. And this is then when Dionysus and Xanthias get involved. They decide that they want to partake in this dance. And so they jump up and they're like, we're here, let us in. So after they join in the dance for a little bit, and the chorus also do something where they like jeer out to the audience. This is something that they mentioned that they would do in their hymns, but obviously I didn't mention that because of summary. So they do a bunch of those things. And then Dionysus, he calls the attention back to him. And he gets the attention of the chorus and he's like, yoo-hoo, hello, hi. I was just wondering, where is the palace of Hades? Like, where can I find him? Because I got some questions for him. The chorus tell them that actually they're not far off. They just have to continue going down this specific road. They like give them directions. And once again, Dionysus turns to Xanthias and he's like, pick up those bags again, slave. Let's go. To change this scene, we have the chorus continue in a dance because when Dionysus and Xanthias went to go hide, they dropped the bags, obviously, when they were hiding, so that way they wouldn't make any noise. So they go back to pick up the bags. As they're doing this, the chorus are dancing on stage. And when all the bags have been picked up and the pair can move into center stage, the chorus sort of fan out to the side. So now it's just the two characters in the middle and they are standing outside the palace of the king of the underworld. So Dionysus, in all of his gear, he goes up to the door and he gives it a nice, firm knock. A guy answers the door, and when he asks who goes there, Dionysus plays the role of Heracles because he has incorrectly thought that because Heracles went down to the underworld, everybody would like love him because he ended up coming back up. So he's like, it's Heracles, hello, sir. And this goes horribly wrong. This guy comes out and he threatens the bejesus out of Dionysus, who is Heracles in disguise. I mean, in multiple different brutal ways, and then slams the door in his face. And as soon as he does this, Dionysus like collapses, he can't breathe properly, soils himself, like the whole shebang. And Xanthias has to come and clean him up, and literally he's there and he's just like, oh my god, what is happening? Xanthias uses this opportunity to say, you're being a bit of a baby. I'm not scared of anyone though. I can do anything I set my mind to. So let's get you cleaned up. Let's sort of wipe your clothing off so that no one knows that this accident has happened. And then I will take the disguise of Heracles and I will then knock on the door. So they agree, they get Dionysus cleaned up, they transfer the lion skin, the club, all of that kind of jazz onto Xanthias. And Xanthias walks up to the door, and as he's about to knock, a maid opens the door, right? Persephone's maid opens the door to greet him. And this maid loved Heracles. She's like, oh my god, you've come back. It's so nice of you to come visit us. Oh, did you know? Oh, you probably didn't know, but we are having dinner right now. That's the time. So we are preparing some pea soup. We have an extra seat. You should absolutely come in. We will not... Heracles, we will not take no for an answer. And if you need more convincing, we even have a pretty dancer girl inside waiting just for you. I mean, the difference is just night and day. Xanthias, being a slave, loves this. I mean, he literally turns to Dionysus and he's like, hey boy, get up, bring the bags in and let's go. And as he's saying this, the maid goes in, tells them that they will be expecting them, for them to take their time gathering the bags. And as soon as she closed the door, Dionysus drops the bags and is like, okay, let's switch disguises back. So after a back and forth and a chorus intrusion, the men do switch disguises back. So now Dionysus is again Heracles and Xanthias is again in his regular slave garb. And literally, as soon as Dionysus finishes dusting off his disguise again, these two women come out of like nowhere and they are pissed as hell to see Heracles. These are two landladies and they start yelling at Heracles that he's the guy that ate all of their food. He's the guy that came in and took advantage, and they are not happy about this. One of them threatens to throw him off a cliff for the way that he treated them. And the other one threatens to take out his teeth. That is how angry they are. Instead, they just decide that they're going to contact Cleon. Again, this is a reference to a real person, but they just decide that they're going to contact Cleon and then they disappear again. And as soon as they step off stage, Dionysus is like, ha, Xanthias, switch back with me. He is so set on never being Heracles again. He is so set on this that he tells Xanthias that if he asks for the disguise back from Xanthias this time, that he, his wife, and his future children will rot in hell. That is how much trauma this poor god Dionysus is such a princess. It's hilarious. Xanthias agrees based on the fact that Dionysus has made this oath, this little swearing moment. So he takes the disguise back on and he gives all the luggage back to Dionysus. But when the door to the palace opens this time, it is not anybody that is a big fan of Heracles. It is the first guy again, right? So he opens up and he is now with a posse of slaves. And he's like, hey, that's the guy, tie him up. Now, why is he so mad? He clarifies here that he doesn't like Heracles because Heracles is, and this is a direct quote, a dog stealer. Okay, so like I mentioned, he had to go down to get Cerberus or Cerberus. This guy has really held a grudge against that. So he does not like Heracles, and he instructs 2 of his slaves out of this posse to go and to start tying down Xanthias, who is now disguised as Heracles. And Xanthias, because he has this disguise on, he turns around and he's like, okay, actually he said something really long, so I'm not going to quote him, but basically he gives off a lot of fighting words, okay? He puts up a fight like Heracles would, which causes 3 more slaves to get involved. And as you can imagine, Dionysus, who's holding all the luggage, watching this happen, thrilled. He's loving this. He literally walks over to that guy that doesn't like Heracles and is like, that Heracles should be ashamed of himself. But Xanthias hears this and he decides that he's not going to let Dionysus do this to him. So he turns the tables on everybody. And he tells all the slaves and he tells this guy that he himself has never been to the underworld. And in order to prove it, he will allow them to torture his slave, who is Dionysus at this point. He literally tells him to do his worst. He's like, you can do whatever you want to my slave because he's my property, you can do it. And this is proof that I've never been here because I'm allowing you to tamper essentially with my property. And this guy likes this, okay? He's like, actually, that's a very good reason. I will absolutely take this guy, give him a little whipping, do the whole thing. And this causes Dionysus to panic. So when he's about to be like lugged off and back into the palace to literally get tortured in like the worst way that they can come up with, Dionysus is like, hey, you can't torture me. I'm immortal. I'm actually a god. And because I'm a god, I'm going to hold you responsible for what you're doing. And literally the guy is like, you're gonna what? And Dionysus introduced himself as Dionysus, the god, and he explains that he is the god and that Xanthias, who they think is Heracles, is actually his slave. And Xanthias manages to turn the tables again. He manages to outsmart Dionysus. And he tells the guy, oh, well, in that case, if he's a god, then you should definitely flog him and definitely torture him because then he won't feel it. So then that will be proof that he's a god as well. So there you go. Ha ha ha. Love Xanthias' energy in this play. He is so brilliant. But Dionysus uses the fact that Xanthias is in disguise to lean into this sort of back and forth that they have going on. So he's like, all right, fair enough. Maybe he isn't pretending to be Heracles, but Heracles is also half god, right? Heracles is also a deity. So therefore you can also flog him and he won't feel it either based on his own logic. To which Xanthias says, fine, flog us both. That's fair enough. Whoever screams first isn't the real deity. So what happens after this point on stage? We literally have both of the men start getting like, they start getting like whacked in various different places. It is so hilarious because they start getting whacked, spanked, so to speak. And it just gets harder and harder. But what happens is that both of them start reacting to this, obviously, because they're getting hit. And as they're like kind of getting louder and louder in their responses, this guy who's doing it is like, oh, so was that a scream? Was that a yell? And both of them start covering it up by being like, no, I just saw an old friend. Hey, hi, how you doing? Or they'll say things like, no, I just saw 2 horsemen. They look so nice. And the last one is that Dionysus literally yells out, Poseidon! And Dionysus turns this into like a prayer and a song. It is so good. It is so ludicrous. It's one of those scenes that, like, when you're reading it, I've never seen this play performed, but as I was reading it, I was like, this is the only scene I cannot die without seeing performed on stage. Like, this would have been so hilarious, and I have no doubt now it's still done perfectly well. But because this keeps happening and neither of them are admitting to the fact that they're in pain with the flogging, that the guy is just like super confused by this, right? So he's just like, I have no idea which one of you is a god and which one isn't. So the only thing that I can do is just let you in front of Hades and Persephone because both of them are gods, so they'll know which one of you is a god. But I'm done. So everyone on stage, aside from the chorus, then exits by going into the house. Well, the palace, I should say. It's not just like a house. It's like the king and queen of the underworld. Anyways, they leave, which leaves the chorus on stage. And as I keep saying with all of these choral odes, we don't have the time because all they do is just like pray a lot and they call up to the gods, blah, blah. So because of summary, we're not going to get into that either. Fast forward, next scene. Xanthias and a slave of Hades come out to the front of the stage and they are like engaged in a menial task as they chit chat. So we get to eavesdrop on this conversation between the two slaves. They start talking about funny things that they do like against their master. So like eavesdropping and then sharing all the news with other people so that rumors start, all of the silly stuff. But as this conversation is going on, we then start hearing screaming and stuff from inside the palace, which leaves Xanthias super confused as to what's going on. The other slave tells us that he shouldn't really worry, and neither should we, obviously, because we're listening to this. He's like, don't worry about it. It's just probably Aeschylus and Euripides getting into another conversation. This keeps getting more and more heated, so we know that the conversation is turning into a full-blown argument. And in order to find out what this is, obviously Xanthias asks the slave what this is all about. So the slave tells us, well, there's a custom down here that applies to all the fine arts and skilled professions. Whoever's the best in each discipline has the right to have his dinner in the Great Hall with his own chair of honor up near Pluto or Hades, right? So the names are just interchangeable. It's just because we keep calling the underworld Hades. And so in a lot of translations, they will be like Pluto is the god and that whatever. You just need to know that they are in the underworld and that the king of the underworld allows this seat to happen. That's not the end of the quote that I'm reading. So he continues, but if somebody else comes along who's better in the profession, then they have to stand down. So basically, for all time, since Aeschylus died, for all time, the entire time that Aeschylus has been in the underworld, this one chair at the table in the Great Hall was for him, okay? He is like the shining glory when it comes to being an artist, being a poet. But now that Euripides has died and he's down there, Euripides is hotly contesting who should be sitting in this chair. And obviously Aeschylus, not happy at all. Xanthias is really surprised that nobody has immediately sided with Aeschylus and decided that this should be his chair forever because he's so good. And the slave kind of like bats him off and is like, hey, you know what happens down here. There aren't very many good people. Just take a look for yourself. And motions towards the audience. So the slave tells us that what Hades has decided to do, what Pluto has decided to do, is to hold a contest between the two of them so they can basically argue it out for the chair at the dinner table in the Great Hall. So Xanthias and the slave withdraw as Dionysus, Pluto, Hades, and Euripides and Aeschylus come out on stage. Euripides and Aeschylus are literally mid-argument when they come out onto the stage. And slaves have also come out, by the way, and they're holding these, like, scales. That was it. I was going to say weights, but they're holding these scales, which is a thing of, like, judgment and all of that. So we know that there's going to be a big discussion that's about to happen. But Euripides and Aeschylus are already at each other's necks. So there's, like, a lot going on. The chorus break this up, have a little song, do a little la 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 la. And when they're done, Euripides immediately jumps up. The first thing he says on stage is, I am the best poet! And Aeschylus, because he's much older, he just remains silent. Euripides keeps talking. He keeps giving a lot of targeted attacks to Aeschylus as he keeps trying to prove his point that he's the better poet. And so throughout Euripides talking, we hear that Aeschylus is getting more and more and more annoyed. He is just slowly bubbling with rage as Euripides continues to say his ridiculous points where he's like, I'm better because of blah, 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 blah. And eventually, Aeschylus snaps. The two of them just start hurling insults at one another for their plays and for the devices that they use. And basically what this contest is going to be is that they're going to compare and contrast their plays. So Aeschylus has this moment where he turns to Dionysus and to Hades Pluto, and he's like, well, Euripides is at an advantage to me because my plays are so good that they've outlived me, so I don't have any of them to hand down here, whereas Euripides has all of them, which is such a burn. It's such a good burn. I literally read this and I had to put my pen down and I went, oh, damn. But even though Euripides, because all of his plays died with him and so therefore he has all of them, Aeschylus is like, fuck it, let's just do the competition anyways because he won't shut up. Before the contest actually begins, they do a bunch of rites. So they burn some incest, they pour out some libations. The two poets, so Aeschylus and Euripides, let up their own prayers as well. So again, that's all in the text. But then eventually Dionysus tells Euripides to begin. He's the guy that can technically start the argument and he can start with whatever he wants. So Euripides begins by ripping into Aeschylus's form. I mean, this man is going into detail about all of the devices that Aeschylus uses and how it's not good and how he's so much better than him. And again, Aeschylus is getting more and more angry. And in fact, he starts like gnashing his teeth together to the point where it's so loud that Dionysus from his chair is like, hey, Aeschylus, cut it out. But Aeschylus can't hold it in much longer and he stands up and he yells at Euripides, blasphemer, what have you done in your plays that's so much better than me? To which Euripides says, me? I made all the characters that I put on stage talk. Democracy at its finest. Jokes aside, Euripides literally says, I wrote about everyday things the audience knew about and could take me up on if necessary. I didn't try to bludgeon them into submission with long words or disorient them with characters, herring about with bells on their chariots and rings on their toes. You've only got to look at his disciples and compare them with mine. What I did was teach the audience to use its brains, introduce a bit of logic into the drama. The public have learned from me how to think, how to run their households, to ask, why is this so? What do we mean by that? Dionysus agrees with this point, and Euripides continues saying all the things that he feels like he's done better than Aeschylus, and Aeschylus is getting, again, more and more angry as he sits there. He has this thing where he like explodes, and then he sits there and he stews, and then he explodes again, and then he sits there and he stews. So as he's sitting there and he stews, he asks Euripides what Euripides looks for in a good poet, like what is the marker for him of a good poet? To which Euripides replies, technical ability is the most important part of somebody who writes plays. So Aeschylus asks what's the punishment for somebody who doesn't have technical ability, and Euripides is like, death. Dramatic much? To which Aeschylus says that he has that because he has a lot of technical ability due to the characters that he puts on stage, and he prioritizes showing off heroic characters to his audience. To which Euripides wants to know how exactly he's made these heroic characters noble in any way and relatable in any way. Aeschylus says that this is the biggest skill, actually, that a poet can have. And he goes through all of the characters that he feels really proud of, that he's put on stage, humanized them, and made them really great heroes and really great examples for his audience, right? So when they're talking about technical ability, they start talking about two different things. And Aeschylus is saying the technical ability is taking somebody who is technically above the audience in one way, but making them so relatable that people can see themselves through that person. And not only that, but it's also then harnessing a story, which is something that is new, it is something that is fresh, and it's something that is putting forward good morals for the audience. So Aeschylus says, that's the kind of thing that a poet should be doing. You see, from the very first, the truly great artist has always had a useful lesson to teach. Orpheus gave us the mysteries and taught people that murder was wrong. Messias showed us how to cure diseases and to prophesy. Hesiod explained about agriculture and the seasons of plowing and harvesting. And why is Homer held up as a paragon, if not for the valuable military instruction embodied in his work? Organization, training, equipment, it is all there. All of that encourages the everyday man to see themselves as a hero and therefore go out and do more heroic things. Aeschylus sort of rounds this all up by basically saying this is a very far cry from what Euripides does, because he just puts these stories on stage, makes them kind of bloody and sad and shocking for the sake of that. And Euripides' rebuttal is like, I didn't invent these stories, I just wrote them really well and put them on stage for everybody to watch. To which Aeschylus says that that is exactly the problem, right? That he says these stories, the ones that Euripides is putting forward and not changing at all and just kind of adapting to the stage, but not adding in a different moral or anything like that, those are stories that people read at school. He says schoolboys have those taught to them, and they give certain lessons to schoolboys, right? They give certain warnings to schoolboys. But our job is to put them on stage for adults. And therefore, it is our responsibility to put different morals in, to show people what they could be, to set better examples than the stuff that the children are reading. Come on, Euripides. Aeschylus then goes into a bunch of examples from Euripides' plays of characters that he just disagrees with the morals that Euripides is putting forward. So for example, he uses the idea of kings in Euripides' plays that will always fall from grace, they will experience poverty, and then they'll get out of paying for whatever it happens to be, right? Whether it be a payment, whether it be a tax, whether it be a trip. He says that they always seem to be exempt on the idea of poverty, but they're still royalty and nobility. And Aeschylus does not agree with that. Further than that, he thinks that Euripides' plays just babble a lot. And so he says that Euripides is putting forward to people that if they talk more, things will get done, which Aeschylus is like, that's just like not how the world works. And lastly, he says that Euripides is basically encouraging people away from wrestling rings, which is their way of exercising. So all in all, Aeschylus is like, you have really shit morals in your plays because you're not actually thinking beyond telling a story that you already know. So what does Euripides do in response? He says that they should actually just start passing each other's prologues, because again, when it comes to technical ability, we're talking about two completely different things. So Euripides is like, let's go through the prose. So he decides to pass out the prologue of the Oresteia. We all know that this is a perfect selection of plays. There is just nothing wrong with them. I obviously have made a lot of jokes about them, but they are incredible. And Aeschylus also is like, give it your best shot, because these are some of my best work, senor. Euripides claims that Aeschylus has a lot of blunders in this, and then they pass one of Euripides, and Euripides is like, C minor perfect. And then they change the conversation to talking about the lyrical side of the words used, the vocabulary used in both of their plays. And so as they're going through it, Euripides is like, all of Aeschylus's plays could basically be the same play because all of the lyrics, quote unquote, are virtually the exact same. What? He then recites a bunch of different Aeschylus plays, and Dionysus is like, oh, okay, well, I'll see if they sound similar. And he starts keeping score, and like literally 4 for 4. He's like, oh yeah, all of these do sound the same. And then Dionysus tries to go to the loo, because with all of this singing, apparently his bowels just like gotta go. And so he tries to get up to go to the loo, and Euripides is like, no, you have to listen to more of these. So he sings a couple more, and Dionysus looks at Aeschylus and he's like, yeah, these do kind of, they do kind of sound like shanty songs, actually. And Aeschylus is so mad about this. He stands up and he's like, sure, I use some traditional ideas in my plays. I use traditional tunes. I use traditional lyrics because they work for a reason. The idea is that they're supposed to be catchy. They're supposed to be familiar. The idea is that people will go in and it won't be hectic going from one play to the other. Unlike Euripides, that uses whatever the fuck comes to mind at the time. His are a mess. He actually calls forward this dancing girl that has castanets because he claims that a lyre is like too much for these. Like none of Euripides' songs work for a lyre. They'll only work for this like really tiny feeble beat, which is a huge insult. So Aeschylus gives some of these examples to the sounds of the castanets. And once this is done, this is when Dionysus basically says that they've heard enough. They don't need to hear any more from them. They don't need to argue anymore. So they should both stand near the scales. And what they're going to do is Euripides also suggests this, that they should just weigh the plays, right? To see which plays are like meatier in what they have to offer as a whole production. So as they stand there and they weigh the plays, Aeschylus wins. But Euripides doesn't want to accept this. And so Euripides is like, we'll have a rematch. Let's do another one. And so they weigh again and again. And like they weigh a number of times and Euripides keeps losing and he keeps getting more and more mad. And obviously Aeschylus is like, we could be here all day, but I will still win because I'm still the better poet. So leave off. But because Euripides won't really let this go, Aeschylus says, fine. This line against line business is far too easy. Let Euripides get into the pan himself, with his children, his wife. Why, even his collected works as well. I will outweigh the whole lot with just 2 of my lines. And Dionysus, seeing that they are still arguing, is like, I actually like both of you. I don't want to make an enemy out of either of you, so I can't decide. I don't want to get involved. To which, this is the first time that Hades Pluto sort of like pipes up and he's like, if you won't get involved, you've just wasted all of our time with this. So to encourage Dionysus, he tells him that if he is to make a decision of who is going to be the winner and who he's happy to have as the winner, then he can leave the underworld with that poet, right? So he can take them back up to the living world. And Dionysus, thrilled by this. He says, bless you. Now listen, you two. I came down here for a poet. But for what? To save the city, of course. Otherwise, there won't be any more drama festivals. And then, where would I be? Now, whoever can think of the best piece of advice to give the Athenians at this juncture, he is the one that I will take back with me. Here's my first question. What should be done about Alcibiades? The city's in a tricky situation. And he goes on with a couple more questions to test the 2 poets. And still at the end of this, Aeschylus ends up having the better reason. So now we know why Dionysus has done this whole journey in the first place. And he has also decided that Aeschylus is the man who can save Athens and save their drama festivals. But Euripides is still livid about this. In fact, he turns to Aeschylus and Dionysus and he calls them traitors. He looks at Dionysus and he's like, you're a villain! You're just gonna leave me here to what? Stay dead? And Dionysus is like, well, yeah, that's what you were doing here anyways. And Euripides is so angry that when the slaves come out to take him away, he is like frantically struggling against them and he's like, no! And he is then pulled off stage. We have a very quick back and forth into the palace where the king of the underworld tells all of the individual members on stage. Remember, the chorus is still off to the side. None of us has involved the chorus. But when we have everybody in the middle, the king of the underworld tells them to go into the palace so that he can basically entertain them hospitably before he sends them off. So they go into the palace, the chorus sing a little bit, and then they come back out in order to close up the play. The king of the underworld says, goodbye then, Aeschylus. Off you go with your sound advice and save the city for us. Educate the fools. You'll find a good many. To which Aeschylus replies, and will you ask Sophocles to look after my chair while I'm away? I declare that the second place is his by right, and on no account let that evil, lying, foul-mouthed rogue sit in my chair, even by accident. It is so petty against Euripides. It is so good right up until the end. And the chorus come over to take Aeschylus and to walk him off stage. And they sing the whole time as they escort him out and escort him up to the city of Athens, which is how the Frogs ends. That is one of the most famous Aristophanes plays. I think it is the most famous Aristophanes plays. Most people read this one at school, and it is so clear to see why, because it is just a wild, hilarious ride from start to finish. It doesn't let up at any point. And obviously I left out so many jokes and so many funny things that happen in Frogs. So I would highly, highly recommend that you guys take a read if instead you are just using this for a class because you didn't want to read it, you guys absolutely need to read it because you will be cackling with laughter as you do. So in the description below, I've not only linked for you to buy a physical copy of the plays, which I always recommend when it comes to comedy because they will tell you all of the references at the end in the notes of physical copies, but you can also find free versions of Frogs down in the description below as well, including Perseus and many other sites which are doing great things in the classics world to make these things accessible to everybody. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of an Aristophanes play, and I will hope to see you next time with more ancient Greek comedy here on MoAn Inc. I'll see you guys then.